They told me my baby was adopted. They didn't shout it. They didn't rush it. They said it in a calm voice, as if they were delivering good news. You should be grateful, the woman said, standing near the end of my hospital bed. He's going to a good family. Grateful. I remember staring at her mouth as she spoke, trying to understand how a word like that could belong in a room where my arms were empty. I had given birth only hours earlier. My body still felt open. My head still felt heavy. Every part of me was waiting for the weight of my baby to be returned. Instead, they brought me papers. I didn't read them properly. I couldn't. The letters swam in front of my eyes, and my hands shook so badly that the pen kept slipping. Just sign here, they said. And here. I asked one question. Can I see him again? There was a pause. Not a long one. Just long enough to feel planned. I'm sorry, the nurse said gently. He's already been placed. Placed. Like an object. Like something that could be moved without consequence. I remember the room being too quiet after that. No crying. No footsteps. No sound of a baby anywhere on the floor. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of my own breathing. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. Shock has a way of stealing your voice before it steals anything else. They told me all the right things. You're young. You didn't have support. This is what's best for him. Best. Another word that didn't belong to me anymore. When they wheeled me out the next day, I kept waiting for someone to stop us. For a nurse to run down the hallway holding a blanket. For a doctor to say there had been a terrible mistake. No one did. I went home without my baby. The house smelled the same. The light fell through the windows the same way. Everything looked exactly as it had the day before. Except I didn't. I packed away the tiny clothes I had bought. I folded the blanket I had held against my chest when I thought he would be sleeping beside me. Everyone told me I would heal. That time would soften the pain. That somewhere, a couple was holding my baby and loving him. 4 years, that thought was the only thing that allowed me to breathe. I told myself a story. That my baby was adopted. That he was safe. That letting go was an act of love. I lived inside that story for a long time. Until one quiet afternoon, decades later, when a woman I barely knew looked at me with tears in her eyes and said something that tore it apart. They didn't adopt him, she whispered. They sold him. And in that moment, I understood that grief had not been the hardest thing I carried. It was the lie. She didn't plan to tell me. I could see that in the way her hands trembled around her cup, in the way she kept looking toward the door of the community center as if someone might overhear us. We had been sitting side by side for weeks, waiting for the same support meeting to start. 2 women who had learned how to carry quiet pain without letting it show. I mentioned my baby once. Just once. I said I had given birth many years ago and had been told my child was adopted. Her face changed. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. It softened in a way that frightened me. Which clinic? She asked. I told her. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. They told me the same thing, she said. But later, I found out it wasn't true. I laughed softly, the way people do when they don't want to hear what's coming next. What do you mean? I asked. She swallowed. They sold him, she said. The room felt smaller after that. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. That she was confusing things. That adoption sometimes looks messy from the outside. But the words didn't come. Because something inside me recognized the truth before my mind did. How do you know? I asked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, worn thin at the edges. Inside were copies of letters, bank statements, an official-looking document with dates that didn't line up. They paid the clinic, she said. Not an agency. The clinic. My hands went cold. That doesn't happen, I said automatically. There are laws. She looked at me with tired eyes. There were loopholes, she replied. And people who knew how to use them. I thought about the day they took my baby. How quickly everything moved. How little they explained. How no one asked me what I wanted. At the time, I had thought it was efficiency. Now, it felt like something else. Control. They told me not to ask questions, she continued. They said it would only make things harder. Harder. That word again. It followed women like us everywhere. I went home that day with her words echoing in my head. I took out the envelope where I had kept my papers for years, untouched. The signatures. The dates. The language that felt strangely vague. I had trusted it all. Because trusting was easier than breaking apart. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the hospital room over and over again. The nurse who avoided my eyes. The doctor who never used my baby's name. The way they moved him out before I could hold him properly. I had told myself for years that the pain was normal. That grief was the price of love. Now I wondered if the pain had been sharpened by deception. And once that thought entered my mind, it refused to leave. I realized something then, something that made my chest tighten with fear and resolve at the same time. If my baby hadn't been adopted, then he hadn't just been taken from me. He had been taken from the truth. And that meant the story I had been living with for decades was only half a story. The other half was still out there, waiting. Once doubt enters your life, it doesn't shout. It whispers. It waits for quiet moments and then asks questions you can't ignore. That night, I laid the papers out on my kitchen table for the first time in years. I had kept them folded neatly, like proof that everything had been done properly. Like protection against regret. Now they felt thin. I read every line slowly. The language was careful. Too careful. Words like placement, arrangement, consent obtained. Nothing about names. Nothing about where my baby went. Nothing about who would raise him. I had signed because I was told it was necessary. Because I was tired. Because I was scared. Because I trusted the people standing over me. Trust is easy when you are vulnerable. I remembered the nurse who held my hand and said, "This way, he'll never know struggle." I remembered believing her. I remembered thinking that my pain was the price of his comfort. That belief had carried me through years I didn't think I would survive. Every birthday, I told myself he was happy. Every holiday, I imagined him opening gifts in a warm house. Every difficult moment, I reminded myself that love sometimes means stepping away. That story had kept me alive. Now, it felt like a trap. I began searching quietly. Not online at first. Not loudly. I asked questions the way frightened people do, carefully, indirectly, without revealing how much the answers mattered. I called the clinic. The number no longer worked. I searched for the doctor. Retired. Then deceased. I searched for the agency name printed on my papers. Nothing. No website. No record. No history. It was as if it had never existed. That scared me more than anything else. Because things that disappear usually do so on purpose. I contacted a records office and requested my full medical file. Weeks later, a thin envelope arrived. Pages were missing. Sections were redacted. Dates didn't match. In the margin of one form, I noticed something handwritten. A number. Not typed. Not stamped. Just written, as if for someone else's eyes. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it mattered. I thought about the woman from the support group. About the folder she carried like a wound that never healed. I called her. We met again. This time, We spread our papers out side by side. The same phrases. The same vague wording. And then I saw it. The same handwritten number. In the same place. We looked at each other without speaking. Someone had been keeping track. Not of mothers. Of babies. That was the moment I stopped telling myself this was a misunderstanding. This was not carelessness. This was design. And for the first time since they took my baby from my arms, I allowed myself to feel something dangerous. Anger. Not the kind that burns and disappears. The kind that stays focused. Because anger, when it is clear, has direction. And mine was finally pointing somewhere. Anger did not make me loud. It made me careful. I stopped telling people what I was looking for. I started listening instead. When you stop asking direct questions, people say more than they intend to. I returned to the support group, not to speak, but to observe. I listened to women tell stories that sounded like echoes of my own. Different years. Different faces. The same clinic. The same reassurances. You're doing the right thing. He'll be better off. This is how it works. One woman mentioned a payment she had never understood. Another spoke about a man who came into the room after the birth, not in a doctor's coat, not a nurse. Just a man with a clipboard who didn't introduce himself. I wrote everything down. Names when I heard them. Dates when I could. Small details people dismissed as unimportant. Details are where truth hides. I went back to the billing records. I requested them again, this time from a different department. The woman on the phone hesitated when I mentioned the year. That was a long time ago, she said. I know, I replied. But I'm patient. She sighed. Some records were archived incorrectly, she said. Others were separated. Separated. Another careful word. When the documents arrived, they confirmed what I already suspected. Charges I never paid. Payments marked as received from private sources. Transfers listed without destinations. One line stood out. Expedited neonatal handling. I took that phrase to a retired hospital administrator I had been quietly referred to by someone who didn't want to be involved. He read it once. Then again. Then he looked at me with something like regret in his eyes. That wasn't for adoptions, he said. That was for bypassing the system. Bypassing? What system? I asked. The one that protects mothers, he replied. I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel. The world looked the same. People went about their lives. But I felt like I was walking through a place where the rules had quietly changed. I contacted a lawyer. Not to sue. Not to accuse. Just to ask questions. She listened carefully, then shook her head. Without proof of where your child went, this will be difficult, she said. Difficult. Not impossible. That distinction mattered. I didn't need a courtroom. I needed a trail. And trails don't begin with certainty. They begin with patterns. I started mapping timelines. Births clustered within certain months. Transfers recorded on the same days. Doctors signing off on paperwork they couldn't possibly have overseen. It wasn't chaos. It was organized. One night, as I compared notes with another woman, she pointed at a name on one of my forms. That man, she said. He drove the vans. Vans. The word made my stomach turn. She described them. Unmarked. Clean. Always leaving late at night. They said it was for privacy, she whispered. Privacy. Another word that had been used to silence us. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Babies were being moved. Quietly. Efficiently. Not into homes waiting with open arms. Into transactions. That was the moment I understood something that changed everything. If my baby had been sold, then somewhere, Someone had paid money for him. And money, unlike memories, always leaves a trace. I didn't know yet where it would lead. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The story I had been told was not meant to comfort me. It was meant to keep me quiet. And I was quiet no longer. Once I understood that money was involved, everything shifted. Grief had taught me how to endure. Anger had taught me how to focus. But money taught me how to trace. I stopped asking people about babies. I started asking about payments. Quietly, I went back through my own records first. Bank statements from years ago, folded and yellowed, kept more out of habit than purpose. I wanted to see if anything unusual had passed through my hands. There was nothing. No compensation. No assistance. No support. Which meant the money hadn't touched me at all. That confirmed what I already felt in my bones. This was never about helping mothers. It was about moving babies efficiently, with as little resistance as possible. I spoke to a former accountant who had once worked with medical practices. He didn't know the clinic personally, but he knew the methods. They don't label it as child-related, he explained. They hide it inside other services. What kind of services? I asked. He thought for a moment. Consulting. Logistics. External handling. Handling. That word again. I went back to the billing sheets and looked with new eyes. There it was. A recurring charge, always paid within 24 hours. Always in cash equivalents. Always approved by the same signature. Different babies. Same approval. I followed the signature. It took time. The man had changed offices. Changed titles. Eventually changed countries. But he hadn't changed habits. I found a company registration under his name in another city. The business description was vague. International facilitation. Family coordination. It made my stomach turn. I didn't contact him. Not yet. I kept following the trail. Through public filings. Through archived business records. Through names that reappeared in different combinations. I found something else too. Transfers overseas, timed exactly 9 months after clusters of births at the clinic. Someone had planned this. Carefully. I thought of my son as a newborn. Of how fragile he must have been. Of how quickly he had been handed over to strangers whose names I would never know. I had believed he was placed lovingly into waiting arms. Now I knew he had been moved like inventory. That thought nearly broke me. But it also gave me something else. Clarity. I wasn't chasing a rumor anymore. I was uncovering a structure. And structures collapse when enough light is applied. I contacted the woman who had first told me the truth. We sat together again, older now, quieter, but stronger. They thought we'd forget, she said. I didn't forget, I replied. I just believed them. She nodded. So did I. We weren't the only ones. More women began to speak. Not publicly. Not yet. But to each other. Stories connected. Details aligned. We were no longer isolated memories. We were a pattern. And patterns are dangerous to people who survive on secrecy. One night, as I organized everything I had learned, I realized something else. If my son had been sold, then someone had raised him believing they had done everything right. That complicated everything. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want destruction. I wanted truth. And truth, I was learning, requires patience as much as courage. Because the hardest part was still ahead. Finding him. Not as a baby. Not as a case. But as a man who had grown up inside a story that was never his choice. And before I could reach him, I had to decide something important. Whether I was ready to change his life the way mine had already been changed. Knowing he existed was one thing. Finding him was another. And finding him meant accepting something I had avoided for years. The truth would not only belong to me, it would belong to him. I sat with that reality for a long time. I imagined him as a child first, even though I knew he was grown now. I imagined birthdays I had missed, questions he might have asked, moments when he might have wondered where he came from. Then I imagined him as a man. With opinions. With loyalties. With a life that did not include me. That was the part that frightened me most. Not rejection. Disruption. What if the truth hurt him more than it helped? What if knowing changed nothing except his peace? I reminded myself of something important. The lie had already shaped his life. Truth could not be more harmful than deception. Still, fear has its own logic. It tells you to wait. To protect others by staying silent. To convince yourself that knowing is enough. I nearly listened. What stopped me was something simple. A memory. The weight of him in my arms for those few minutes after he was born. The warmth. The certainty. I had not imagined that. And I would not let that be erased quietly. I returned to the records. I stopped searching for names. Names can be changed. I searched for dates. Birth dates don't move as easily. I cross-referenced hospital birth logs with foreign adoption records from the same year. I searched public databases late into the night, teaching myself systems I never thought I would understand. Most searches led nowhere. Some led to dead ends. Then one result made my heart stop. A record from another country. A male child. Born on the same day. Transferred through a private facilitator. Adopted within weeks. The facilitator's name matched the signature I had been tracing for months. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. This wasn't confirmation. But it was close enough to make my hands shake. I followed the trail carefully. The adoptive family's name appeared in public records years later. School announcements. A graduation photo. A small article about a local sports team. There he was. Older. Alive. Smiling. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I felt something steadier than emotion. Recognition. Not because I knew him. Because some part of me had always known he was out there. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Finding him did not feel like victory. It felt like responsibility. Because once you see someone's life, you can't pretend you don't have the power to affect it. I asked myself the hardest question of all. Was I prepared to be careful with the truth? Not careful to protect myself. Careful to protect him. That night, I slept very little. By morning, I had my answer. Truth does not belong to those who are comfortable. It belongs to those who are willing to carry it gently. And if I was going to step into his life at all, I would do it that way. Slowly. Respectfully. Without demand. I didn't know how yet. But I knew I would not walk away. Not again. I didn't write to him right away. Even after I found him, even after I saw his face on a screen and knew in my bones that he was my son, I waited. Waiting felt safer than acting. Every word I thought of sounded wrong. Too heavy. Too accusing. Too emotional. I didn't want to arrive in his life like a storm. I wanted to arrive like a truth that could breathe. I opened a blank document and stared at it for a long time. I am your mother. I typed it once. Then deleted it. That sentence carried too much weight for a first step. I'm trying to understand my past. I typed that next. It felt dishonest. This wasn't just about my past anymore. I closed the computer and went for a walk. The world didn't know what I was carrying. People laughed. Cars passed. Life moved forward without asking permission. That steadiness helped. When I came back home, I tried again. I wrote slowly. Not from anger. Not from longing. From respect. I wrote about the clinic. About what I had been told. About what I had recently discovered. I did not accuse his parents. I did not claim him. I did not ask him to choose anything. I told him only this: that I believed he deserved to know the truth about his beginning. That I understood if he didn't want contact. That my intention was honesty, not disruption. I read it aloud to myself. It sounded calm. That mattered. Before sending it, I stopped. I imagined him reading it. At his kitchen table. On his phone late at night. With confusion tightening his chest the way mine once had. I added one last line. You don't owe me a response. This message is yours to keep or ignore. Then I pressed send. There was no dramatic feeling afterward. No relief. Just exposure. Like stepping out into open air after years underground. I spent the rest of the day doing small things. Folding laundry. Watering plants. Cleaning surfaces that were already clean. That night, I slept poorly. Not because I expected an answer. Because I knew there was no going back. The truth was no longer just mine. Whatever happened next would shape 2 lives, not one. And all I could do now was wait. Quietly. Carefully. Without trying to control the ending. Because the ending, I was learning, never belongs to the person who tells the truth. It belongs to the one who receives it. I expected silence. Days. Weeks. Maybe forever. I prepared myself for that. What I was not prepared for was how quickly the answer came. 3 days after I sent the message, my phone buzzed while I was standing in line at the grocery store. I almost ignored it. Unknown numbers had started to make my heart race, and I was tired of that feeling. But something made me look. It was him. The message was short. I've read what you wrote. I don't know what to say yet. But I think we should talk. I stood there, holding my basket, unable to move. People shifted around me. Someone cleared their throat. The world kept going. My hands shook as I typed back. Whenever you're ready. I'm here. He replied an hour later. Can we talk on the phone tonight? I sat down when I read that. Not because I was weak. Because my body needed to understand what my mind already knew. That evening, I waited. I didn't rehearse what I would say. I didn't make notes. I just Saturday. When the phone rang, I answered on the first ring. Hello, I said. There was a pause. Then his voice. I've been trying to figure out how to start, he said. You don't have to, I replied. We can just be quiet for a moment. We were. I could hear his breathing. He could hear mine. I spoke to my parents, he said finally. They're shocked. They're hurt. But they believe you didn't do this to us. That mattered more than I expected. I never wanted to hurt anyone, I said. I know, he replied. That's why I called. He asked me questions. About the clinic. About the day I gave birth. About what I had been told. I answered carefully. I did not dramatize. I did not soften the truth. I spoke the way you speak when you want to be understood, not believed blindly. At one point, he went quiet. I keep thinking about how close this came to never being known, he said. Yes, I replied. I think about that too. He exhaled slowly. I'm not angry, he said. I'm unsettled. That makes sense, I told him. We talked for over an hour. Not about feelings. About facts. When we hung up, I didn't feel relief. I felt responsibility deepen. Because now, the truth wasn't just opened. It was shared. And shared truth changes shape. It grows weight. It asks more of you. Before going to bed, I sent him one last message. Thank you for listening. However this unfolds, I'm grateful you were willing to hear me. He replied simply, I think the truth matters. Even when it's late. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For years, I had imagined this moment as something explosive. What it was instead felt fragile. Like holding something that could either heal or harm depending on how gently it was carried. And I knew then that this story was no longer about uncovering a crime. It was about learning how to live with truth without letting it wound the wrong people. That would be the hardest part. And it was only just beginning. After that call, nothing rushed forward. And that was a relief. We didn't speak the next day. Or the day after that. Not because anything was wrong. Because space was doing its quiet work. I understood then that truth does not demand speed. It asks for steadiness. A few days later, he sent a message. I keep noticing small things, he wrote. Things I never questioned before. I asked him what he meant. The date, he replied. The clinic name on my papers. The way my parents always said everything happened very fast. I let him speak. I did not interrupt with conclusions. When people are discovering their own truth, they need room to arrive at it themselves. We began talking once a week. Sometimes more. Sometimes less. There was no schedule. Just a shared understanding that this was not something to rush. He told me about his childhood. Not with bitterness. With gratitude. I was loved, he said more than once. I don't want that erased. It won't be, I replied. Nothing you loved disappears because you learn more. That sentence felt important. For both of us. He asked me about my life too. Where I worked. What kind of home I lived in. What my days looked like. Simple questions. But each one felt like a bridge being built plank by plank. One evening, he asked something that stopped me. Did you ever celebrate my birthday? He asked. I took a breath. Yes, I said. Every year. How? He asked. I lit a candle, I replied. And I wished you peace. There was a long pause on the line. That means more than you know, he finally said. We didn't talk about meeting. Not yet. Neither of us brought it up. Because naming something too early can make it fragile. Instead, we let familiarity grow. We laughed once. A small, surprised laugh. It felt strange and wonderful at the same time. I noticed how careful he was with me. How he checked in before asking personal questions. How he never made me feel like I owed him explanations. I mirrored that care. This was not about reclaiming something lost. It was about honoring something found. One night, after we hung up, I sat quietly and realized something unexpected. I no longer felt like I was chasing the past. I was walking beside the present. That shift mattered. Because chasing keeps you tired. Walking allows you to notice where you are. I still felt anger toward what had been done. Toward the people who had sold babies and called it care. But that anger no longer lived in my chest. It lived somewhere quieter. Fuel, not fire. And slowly, as days passed, something else began to form. Not hope in the dramatic sense. Not joy. But trust. The kind that grows when two people decide, again and again, to move gently instead of quickly. And I knew then that whatever this relationship became, it would not be defined by what was stolen from us. It would be defined by how we chose to stand in the truth now. Together. He was the one who said it first. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just a sentence placed carefully between two ordinary moments. I think I'm ready to meet, he said. If you are. I closed my eyes when I read the message. Not because I was overwhelmed. Because I wanted to answer from the calm place we had built, not from the part of me that still ached. I wrote back. Whenever you feel comfortable. We chose a place that belonged to neither of us. A quiet park near a river. Benches spaced far apart. People passing by without paying attention. Neutral ground. I arrived early, as I always do when something matters. I sat on a bench and watched the water move. Steady. Unhurried. When I saw him walking toward me, something inside me shifted. Not a rush. Not a collapse. Recognition. He looked like himself. Not like the baby I remembered. Not like a version I had imagined. Like a man who had lived a full life. He stopped a few steps away. We didn't hug. We smiled. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. We sat down side by side, leaving space between us. That space mattered. We talked about the park. About the weather. About the river. Normal things. And then, without looking at me, he said something that made my chest tighten. I was afraid it would feel awkward. "Does it?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "No," he said. "It feels quiet. In a good way." I nodded. "That's how it feels to me too." We sat there for a while without speaking. The silence wasn't empty. It was respectful. At one point, he turned slightly toward me. "I want you to know something," he said. "I don't feel like I was taken from you." I listened. "I feel like I was moved through something that shouldn't have happened," he continued. "But I don't feel stolen from my life." Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "That means more than you know." He smiled softly. "I don't know what this makes us," he said. "And I don't think we need to decide right now." "I agree," I said. We walked a little after that. Not close. Not distant. Just together. Before we parted, he looked at me and said something that settled deep in my chest. "I'm glad you didn't come looking for me angry," he said. "I wasn't angry at you," I replied. "I was angry at the lie." He nodded. "That makes a difference," he said. As I watched him walk away, I didn't feel loss. I felt something steadier. Peace. Not because everything had been fixed, but because nothing had been forced. This meeting hadn't erased the past. It had given it context. And sometimes, context is the gentlest form of healing. After we met, I expected the world to feel different. Louder. Brighter. Heavier. Instead, it felt almost exactly the same. And that surprised me. I went home, made tea, and sat by the window as evening settled in. The sky turned the same colors it always had. Cars passed. A neighbor's dog barked once and then went quiet. Life didn't pause to mark the moment. And I realized something important. Peace doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, and you only notice it when you stop waiting for something else. He messaged me later that night. "Thank you for today," he wrote. "I was worried I'd feel overwhelmed." I didn't. I smiled. "Neither did I replied. "That feels like a good sign." In the days that followed, we didn't suddenly become close. We didn't start calling each other more often. Nothing dramatic shifted. What changed was something smaller. The tension disappeared. Before, every conversation carried the weight of what might happen next. Now, that weight was gone. We had met. We had seen each other. We had survived it gently. That mattered. He told me later that his parents had struggled at first. Not with me. With the truth. "They feel guilty," he said. "Even though they didn't know." "That's human," I replied. "And painful." I made one thing very clear to him. "I don't want to take anything from them," I said. "I'm not here to replace anyone." "I know," he answered. "And I believe you." Trust. That word finally felt earned. We spoke about the past less and less. Not because it didn't matter, because it no longer needed defending. One afternoon, he sent me a photo of a place he liked to walk. "I thought you'd enjoy this," he wrote. I realized then that something had changed. He wasn't sharing out of obligation. He was sharing because he wanted to. That distinction meant everything. I thought back to the day they told me my baby was adopted, to the emptiness in my arms, to the story I had been given to survive. For years, I had believed that story was all I would ever have. Now I understood something different. The lie had shaped my pain, but it hadn't destroyed my love. Love had waited quietly, without demanding recognition, until the truth could hold it safely. I didn't get back the years I lost. I never would. But I gained something else. Understanding, connection, and the freedom to stop imagining what might have been. The people who sold babies believed they were erasing mothers. They were wrong. They only delayed the truth. And truth, no matter how late it arrives, has a way of finding its voice. This story isn't about justice being served in a courtroom. It's about something quieter. A lie exposed. A life reconnected. And a wound that finally stopped bleeding, not because it disappeared, but because it was seen. I was told my baby was adopted. I discovered he was sold. And when the truth finally reached both of us, it didn't tear us apart. It taught us how to stand in the same story without fear. That is where this chapter ends. Not with anger, not with regret, but with a calm I never thought I would feel again. After everything came into the open, I expected my days to feel heavier. I thought the truth would sit on my shoulders like a weight I could never put down. But it didn't. It settled somewhere deeper, not as a burden, as understanding. Weeks passed, then months. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm, but something inside me had changed quietly. I noticed it in the way I woke up in the mornings, in the way my chest no longer tightened when I thought about the past. For the first time in decades, I wasn't carrying unanswered questions. That mattered more than I ever realized. He and I stayed in touch, gently. Sometimes a message every few weeks. Sometimes a short call. Sometimes silence that didn't feel uncomfortable. There was no pressure to define anything. We let the relationship exist without labels. That freedom made it possible. One afternoon, while sitting alone in my living room, I caught myself smiling at nothing in particular. It startled me. I realized I was thinking about him not with longing, not with sadness, but with a quiet sense of pride. He had grown into a thoughtful man. Despite everything. Despite the lie that surrounded his beginning. That told me something important. The people who raised him had loved him well. And love, when it is real, leaves marks that lies cannot erase. I thought often about the woman I used to be. The young mother who believed she was doing the right thing by letting go. Who folded tiny clothes with shaking hands and told herself that pain was proof of love. I wished I could sit beside her now. Not to tell her everything would be okay. But to tell her this. You are not weak for believing. You are not foolish for trusting. You survived something that was never meant to be survived honestly. That compassion for my younger self felt like another kind of healing. The anger I once carried toward the clinic, the doctors, the people who turned babies into transactions, it didn't disappear completely. But it no longer consumed me. It became a quiet reminder. A reminder of why truth matters. Of why silence protects the wrong people. Of why stories like mine should be told, even when they arrive late. I began speaking more openly in small spaces. Not publicly. Not loudly. Just honestly. To women who carried similar grief. To people who wondered why certain questions never leave you alone. I told them this. You are not wrong for wanting answers. You are not selfish for reopening the past. Truth does not destroy love. It clarifies it. One evening, he sent me a message that stayed with me. "I don't feel like my life was a mistake anymore," he wrote. "I feel like it was complicated." I read that sentence over and over. Because that was it. Nothing about our story was simple. But simple is not the same as true. Our lives weren't broken. They were complicated by decisions made without our consent. And now, they were honest. That honesty didn't demand more from us. It gave us permission to rest. I didn't get a reunion scene out of a movie. I didn't get years returned to me. What I got was something quieter and more lasting. Peace without denial. Connection without ownership. Truth without destruction. They said my baby was adopted. I discovered he was sold. And when the lie finally fell away, what remained wasn't emptiness. It was clarity. And clarity, I've learned, is one of the rarest gifts a life can offer. For a long time, I thought the lesson of my life was about loss. About how much a person can endure. About how grief reshapes you without asking permission. I was wrong. Loss was only the doorway. The real lesson came later, when everything I believed was gently but firmly rearranged. I learned that truth does not arrive to punish you. It arrives to free you. Even when it hurts. Even when it comes too late to change the past. Especially then. I thought about the years I spent protecting the lie. How I defended it to myself. How I softened its edges so I could live with it. I used to believe that survival meant not asking too many questions. Now I understood something deeper. Survival is only the beginning. Living begins when you stop being afraid of what the answers might do to you. I had spent decades telling myself that letting go was love. And in some ways, it was. But love without truth is fragile. It survives, but it never fully rests. When the truth finally came, I expected everything to fall apart. Instead, it settled. Like dust after a storm. I realized that the lie had kept me frozen in one moment of my life. The truth allowed me to move forward again. I also learned that motherhood is not erased by time or distance. It doesn't disappear because someone else steps in. It simply changes shape. I did not raise my son. That is a fact. But I carried him. I thought of him. I held space for him in my life, even when I didn't know where he was. That mattered. It mattered to me. And, quietly, it mattered to him. One afternoon, months after everything had settled, he asked me something that surprised me. "Do you regret looking for the truth?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. "No," I said finally. "I regret how long I believed I didn't deserve it." He nodded slowly. "That makes sense," he said. That moment stayed with me, because it revealed something I hadn't noticed before. The lie didn't just take my baby. It took my confidence in my own instincts. It taught me to doubt what my body knew. Learning the truth gave that back to me. I trusted myself again. And that changed everything. I stopped shrinking my questions. I stopped apologizing for wanting clarity. I stopped carrying guilt that was never mine. The people who sold babies counted on silence. They counted on shame. They counted on women believing they should be grateful for pain they didn't choose. They were wrong. Silence may last years. But truth has patience. I don't know what the future holds for my son and me. I don't need to. The story no longer demands a perfect ending. It asks only for honesty. And honesty is something we have learned how to hold. Carefully. Respectfully. Without fear. That is the lesson I never expected to learn. That even when something is taken from you, your voice does not belong to the past. It belongs to the present. And when you finally use it, the future opens quietly, like a door that was never locked. There was a day when I realized I wasn't rehearsing the story anymore. For years, I had carried it like something fragile, repeating it in my mind so it wouldn't fall apart. Every version began the same way. The hospital. The words they used. The empty arms. But one morning, while making tea, I noticed something simple. I hadn't thought about the clinic at all. Not avoidance. Not denial. Just absence. That startled me more than any revelation ever had. It meant the story had finally moved from the center of my life to its proper place. It was no longer the room I lived in. It was a room I could visit when I chose. I understood then that healing is not forgetting. It is remembering without being pulled backward. I still spoke to my son from time to time. The word felt strange even now, but it felt honest too. We didn't speak often. We didn't need to. Our connection didn't require constant tending. It existed quietly. One afternoon, he sent me a message that made me pause. "I told someone about you today," he wrote. I waited before responding. "What did you say?" I asked. "That you're part of my story," he replied. "And that knowing you didn't change my life. It helped me understand it." I put my phone down and sat very still. That was everything. That was more than I had ever hoped for. Not a claim. Not a role. Understanding. I realized then that my fear of disrupting his life had been built on the idea that truth must always explode. But truth doesn't explode when it is carried with care. It unfolds. Slowly. Gently. Without stealing oxygen from the people around it. I began to notice how differently I spoke about my past. Without apology. Without self-blame. I stopped explaining myself before anyone asked. I stopped softening the edges of my own experience to make others comfortable. That change was subtle, but it reshaped everything. When people asked me why I had waited so long to look for answers, I no longer flinched. I believed what I was told, I said. And then I chose to believe myself. That was enough. I didn't need to convince anyone. The story had stopped owning me. I owned it now. And ownership did not feel heavy. It felt clean. I thought often about other women who never got answers. Who lived their entire lives inside a lie because it was safer than risking collapse. I understood them deeply. And I wished them courage, not certainty. Because certainty rarely comes first. Courage does. I learned that closure does not mean tying everything neatly together. It means accepting that some things will always feel unfinished. And choosing peace anyway. The truth did not return my baby to me. It did not undo the harm. But it gave me something just as important. My sense of agency. My voice. My right to know. And once I had that, the story no longer followed me everywhere. It walked beside me. Calm. Quiet. Contained. I wasn't defined by what was taken anymore. I was defined by what I chose to face. And that choice, once made, never left me again. I used to think endings were loud. That they came with tears, or apologies, or some clear moment where everything finally made sense. This one didn't. It arrived the way evening does. Slowly. Almost without notice. There was no final conversation where we said everything we felt. No moment where the past was wrapped up and set aside. Instead, life kept moving, and I moved with it. I still thought about him sometimes. Not every day. Not with urgency. Just in passing, the way you think about someone who matters but doesn't need you to hold on to them. On his birthday that year, I lit a candle like I always had. But this time, I didn't imagine where he might be. I knew. I didn't wish for his life to be different. I didn't wish for time back. I wished him steadiness. And then I let the candle burn down without watching it. That felt important. I realized something else had changed too. When people spoke about motherhood around me, I no longer felt that quiet tightening in my chest. I didn't feel erased or incomplete or like I had to explain myself. I knew who I was. I had been a mother for a moment. I had been a mother in memory. And I had been a mother in silence. All of those were real. None of them needed permission. The people who sold babies never entered my thoughts anymore. Not because they didn't matter. Because they no longer had power over the shape of my life. Their actions explained pain. They did not define meaning. One evening, months after our last conversation, my son sent me a message. "I hope you're doing well," it said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm okay." I read it once. Then again. "I'm glad," I wrote back. "That's always what I wanted." He didn't reply after that. And that was fine. There was nothing hanging in the air. No question left unanswered that needed words. Some relationships don't grow forward. They settle sideways. They find a place that fits without demanding more space. That was ours. I don't tell this story because it has a perfect ending. I tell it because it has an honest one. They said my baby was adopted. I discovered he was sold. The truth arrived late, and it arrived quietly. It didn't give me back what was taken. But it gave me something I had been missing without knowing it. My trust in myself. My right to ask questions. My ability to live without rehearsing loss. This story didn't end with justice or reunion. It ended with peace. And peace, I have learned, is not something you wait for. It is something you choose, once the truth is finally in the light. That is where my story rests. Not in what was stolen, but in what remained. And what remained was enough.